dysfunctional vet here. This is the HM 126 Woodland Mills bandsaw. It's used for cutting lumber. I recently had to readjust my blocks. See these blocks right here, these guides? They were out, but they were not worn. I had too much play in them. You need about a 1/16 of an inch above and below. Same over here. You always need to check and make sure that you have the correct distance on your bearings. On this side over here, it's a little bit tight because of the sawdust that's in the way. And as you see, everything is good to go. Now, there is a video on the website, and I do recommend you watch it, and it's how to level this thing. I've been having some trouble with this saw. I changed out this bearing right here. This bearing over here showed to be good, but it turned out that my adjustment here was bad, and my blocks, my saw guides, were out of adjustment. Having corrected this, everything is now cutting straight, but I want to make sure it's level. I'm going to be filming in the shadow, and there's no way to avoid it. I set my small, this is a 6-inch square. I set this at 1 1/4 inches. I set this piece here, and I make sure that the blade just touches it. Actually, it's slightly lower, that's fine. Let me show you how I set my depth. This is called an index wheel. Now my setting is right here, and what I do is I lower this in rotations until I find my setting. In this case, I started here. It takes 4 rotations and 8 of these holes past my start point to be 1 1/8 inch. I recommend this. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to calibrate my saw to make sure that it's cutting square. I'm going to show you something while we're standing here. This adjustment is loose. See how it freely turns? That's your lock bolt. The nut underneath it is what raises and lowers. And I started to do this, and I decided I would go ahead and film this thing for you. I'm going to do it the way Woodland Mills shows you how to do it. I do it slightly different. The altitude of this thing is less important than to make sure that you get it square. So I'm going to lower it down so that there's no conflict between Woodland Mills and myself. I want to put a plug in for customer service. Their customer service is absolutely fantastic. I call them up, I give them the year that I bought it. In fact, I've been buying so much stuff this year because this thing I bought in 2012, I'm starting to replace stuff. When I call them up, they're quickly able to find my model number and get me what I need. I want to really plug the customer service for this sawmill. They are the best. Trust me on that one. I've worked with a lot of service departments, and I've never run across anybody like these people. They're stellar. I give them 25 stars out of 5 because they're that good. But let's get back to squaring this thing up according to the Woodland Mills video. A very close examination using this 6-inch square that I was showing you just a minute ago, you can see that I'm hovering just a fraction of an inch above my 6-inch measure. Now they show to use a 4-inch block. 4-inch block is fine. I just don't have one lying around that I know is square. So I set this over here, and as you can see, I'm physically touching, whereas over here I'm not touching. I'm there, but I'm not. See, this slides under. Now these teeth have a cant on them, which is either raised or lowered, which is how it cuts and ejects the stuff. Over here I'm a little bit low. So what I need to do is bring this up, and I'll show that process now. I cannot film the nut that's underneath this. I can't get the camera in here for you to see that. This is a 14 millimeter nut. The one below it is also a 14 millimeter nut. If you remember, lefty loosey, righty tighty. Since I'm working upside down, it will be opposite. Going left is turning right if you were looking down at it. Now I'm not going to try to film me raising this thing because I can't hold the camera well enough for you to see it, and if I set the camera on a tripod and try to film in here, all you're going to see is the back of my leg. Rather than do that, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up, and then I'll show you what's happening down here. Alright, I have adjusted this thing. It's taken a couple of minutes, and as you can see, I'm right at the top of the teeth here. I'm right at the top of the teeth here. Now these teeth right here are pointed down, so I want to go, these teeth right here are pointed down, so I want to go to the teeth that are pointed up. So you can see that. I sure hope I filmed it. Alright, the only recommendation I would make on this is when you get the saw and you first calibrate it, I would move this piece down here. The only recommendation I would make is when you first get your saw and you calibrate it, I would adjust this up a little bit more so you can get a deep socket in here. This is too close to this bottom throat, or this bottom plate, to be able to get a deep socket in. So I'm having to do it with this wrench. It does work, it just takes a little longer. So let's go ahead and tighten this little jewel down and call it quits. Before we go any further, let's recap a few things. Your saw is not cutting straight. Before you do anything, check your bearings. After you check your bearings, check your guide blocks. Make sure they're not worn. They should have about a 1/16 of an inch. That's about the thickness of a business card in here in between them. These take a number 17 Allen wrench to remove. It has to be calibrated with the blade in place, so make sure you take proper precautions. I wrapped this in cardboard and tape and wore gloves to make sure I wouldn't cut my hands like I normally do when I'm working with these blades. This structure right here, if you don't know what it is a structure designed to catch on the dogs so that you don't damage your blade. This has to be adjusted. You just tap it with a hammer. I may eventually remove this for own personal reasons. I hit a dog once and ruined a blade. It was brand new, just put it on. And since then I've become hyper about not hitting those dogs. Alright, saw's not cutting straight. Check your bearings to make sure they're riding properly. Check your guide blocks. Check the tension on the saw. There should be some play in it. Check your positioning on your saw leveling. Make sure all that's good. If everything is still going good, if you look, you see I don't have the dog attached over here. This weight is so heavy that I don't have to worry about it moving. And at some point, I'll rotate this, and when I do, to finish cutting out my boards, when I do, then I'll dog it down because the vibration will start to enter into it. So, let's recap the recap. Your saw's not cutting straight. Check your bearings. Check your guides. Check your tension here to make sure that this thing is good. Check your calibration using some type of a block down here with the saw. Having done that, the next thing is make sure that your log is not in vibration, because if it is, it won't cut straight. The last thing to check, if you don't know, will be the saw blade itself. If the saw has gone dull, it's going to try to walk. There's no way around it. The other thing is, of course, the tension on the T-bar. When I called up to talk to these guys, they told me that because mine is an older model, 2012, there was a grommet in here that may have deformed. If that's the case, I can get an upgrade piece that will fit in there that uses 2 compression springs on washers and will hold the tension. The other thing I can do to make sure that my blade is tensioned correctly is to weld, which I can do, a bolt onto my T-handle and then use a torque wrench to set the correct pressure. See the user's guide for your particular saw. With that said, I think I am now ready to put away all my toys and cut this log into boards. I expect to get about 15 1 1/8 inch, or correction, 13 1 1/8 inch boards out of this, and then I will be sawing those into 8 1/4 by 9 feet 7 inches and I'll be planing them, and then I will be cutting them to the exact width and length I want. I'm making a wooden floor out of these. The wooden floor, if I were to buy it, would be about 500 bucks, and I would still have to plane it, and I would still have to join it down to the exact length. So I'm saving basically 1/4. I'm saving around 500 bucks for this. I was about to say is a quarter of wasn't that much. I paid, I think, $3,000 for this thing. It's paid for itself multiple times. With that said, dysfunctional vet out. And some of this will be edited out.